So much of what gets said about him and what he did is actually completely wrong. And
Give us some examples.
Well, I mean, just in terms of his motives, for example, the debate about his motives has always confounded me because just put yourself in Edward Snowden's place where you've decided that you're going to take tens of thousands of top secret documents from one of the most secretive agencies of the world's most powerful government because you think that there's serious wrongdoing that has been hidden from your fellow citizens. Think about what you could do with that material. You could sell it in secret to pretty much any intelligence agency on the planet and enrich yourself for the rest of your life without anybody knowing. You could, if you were intending to harm your country or your government, pass it secretly to adversaries of your government without anyone knowing about it. He didn't do any of that. He could have just taken it all and put it up on the internet if his goal were to just have this indiscriminate publication and harm the country. He didn't do that either. Instead, he did exactly what you would want a whistleblower in that circumstance to do, which is to meet with journalists who work with some of the largest news outlets in the West and say to them, I'm going to give you this material, but I'm giving it to you based on the promise that you will be extremely meticulous about going through every word of it and not publishing anything that can harm people, but instead only things necessary to inform the public debate. So you can have different views on surveillance policies, the extent to which government should be spying on us, but I think it's really hard to call into question that his motives were anything other than what he says they are and were patriotic, which was that he genuinely believed that if the government is going to spy on all of us indiscriminately and without any evidence of wrongdoing, that we ought to at least know about that.
I agree with all that. I think my problem comes later with him, where he seems to have cozied up in a pretty friendly way to the Russians now and to Putin, and has great things to say about Putin, has great things to say about Russia, and maybe he's been treated really well there. But my suspicion now is that he's a little too cozy with them and perhaps disseminating information to them.
So I think the key word there is suspicion, which is sort of another word for I have this tingly feeling inside of me that leads me to believe something even though I have no evidence. Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, first of all, Edward Snowden didn't decide to be in Russia. He didn't want to be in Russia. He was actually flying through Russia on his way to Latin America, which is where he intended to seek asylum, knowing the Obama administration would put him into prison for the rest of his life. And like most rational people, he didn't want to be in prison for the rest of his life for being a whistleblower.
Yes,
and the reason he couldn't get out of Russia was because on the plane from Hong Kong to Russia, they revoked his passport and then told the Cubans, if you let him pass through to Latin America, there's going to be all kinds of recriminations for you. So he couldn't physically leave there, which is why he was trapped in the international zone of the Moscow airport for 5 weeks. So, yes, he did seek asylum in Russia because that was the only choice that he had, the only alternative. But he's actually been quite critical of Russia. He wrote an op-ed in The Guardian saying that Putin lied in that television appearance that he did where he asked him about mass surveillance, and Putin denied it. And he said, no, actually, Russia engages in mass surveillance against their own citizens as well and is quite oppressive. He's been, you know, pretty outspoken. But, you know, I mean, the reality is that right now the Russian government is the one thing standing between him and an American cage for the rest of his life. And so I think it's easy for us to sit here and say he should stand up and denounce Putin more aggressively. But he's been put in a very difficult position. But there's zero evidence that he gave a word or a piece of paper to the Russian government. And why would he? I mean, why would he unravel his life and risk going to prison to stop mass surveillance in the United States, only to then help the Russian government figure things out? That's not what he has done. And the reason there's no evidence for it is because it hasn't happened. For
a more comfortable life in Russia, if he's got to stay there the rest of his life.
No, but he already proved to you that given the choice between a comfortable life and standing up for what he believes is right, he will choose standing up for what he believes is right and give up a comfortable life. He had a very comfortable life that he willingly gave up.